this video is called something like your relationship with your guitar. Okay. And this is something that I think is really important. It's pretty much the umbrella under which I do all of my work. It doesn't matter if I'm learning pieces of the repertoire, if I'm writing music, if I'm arranging, if I'm doing ensemble stuff, if I'm studying technique. It doesn't matter. This is the driving force of everything. Okay, so I think it's very important. And I ran across a quote recently that I thought summed it up very nicely. And the quote is this: "A guitar should not make you sound better than you would otherwise. You should make the guitar sound better than it would otherwise." So what does this mean? Okay, so let me paint you a picture because I need to use this as an example. So let's pretend that you're studying classical guitar, flamenco guitar. You've put in a few good months, maybe a few good years of work. You've gotten a lot out of your Yamaha or Cordoba or cheap Ortega guitar, and you're ready to upgrade. Okay, you saw some homeboy make a video about buying a handmade classical guitar, and you're like, wow, I need one of those. The guy talked way too much, but I need to get one. So you end up going and getting a nice classical or flamenco guitar, right? So with your first experience, you're probably gonna sit down and pick up one of these guitars and play it, and you're probably gonna think this: I've never sounded as good as I do right now. Okay, now this is normal. The same thing happened to me, but this is actually the first part of the quote. A guitar should not make you sound better than you would otherwise. But you have to be here to start, okay? So let's say you find a guitar, you get a good deal on it, you're super happy. Of course, you sound better than you ever have, and you're excited about that, and that's fantastic. That's great, okay? Nothing wrong with that. But let's just pretend that you're very dedicated and you're thinking about this quote. A guitar should not make you sound better than you would otherwise. You should make it sound better than it would otherwise. So you're like, what does that mean? Okay. So you're doing your work on your guitar. And as you go through the days and weeks and months and years, you do something differently. You start to put more of an emphasis on how the guitar is responding. And let's say you get really into it, and instead of thinking, I want to do this or I'm going to do this, with every note, with every piece, with everything that you do, you are paying more and more attention to what does the guitar do when I do that? Everything that you do is also part of how does the guitar respond? Then you start to notice different things. When you start to notice different things, you might even experiment. If I do this, what does the guitar do? If I do it like that, what does it do? Okay. Then you can decide, well, the guitar seems to like this one the best. When I do this, I get the loudest sound. It's never sounded so loud. Okay, valuable information. So maybe you keep going with that. And you figure out some big chord technique, and you say, man, when I do this big chord technique and I really push the strings and I use a lot of flesh on my thumb, I get this really rich, deep sound. My guitar's never done that before. It sounds like it kind of likes it. So you're like, man, I've got that in my bag. When I want to use a big sound, I use that chord with the thumb, and awesome, okay? Maybe over time you keep experimenting and you realize, the guitar really likes it when I do that. Maybe there's other ways that I can make it do that. Maybe when I do rest stroke scales, I can make it do that some. Maybe when I do free stroke chords, I can make it do that some. And you keep listening and responding and keep experimenting, okay? Keep reacting to what the guitar is telling you. You might find things like, even when I play really quietly, I can make the guitar do that song. Or, if I fret a note a particular way, it actually makes the guitar do that song. Maybe. So, let's say you keep doing all these things, and these are all things that you work into your technique. So, you've changed from being something that makes a sound on a nice instrument and it says, well, I've never sounded so good. This guitar makes me sound great. To, I'm pretty much only doing things that the guitar tells me it really likes. And the more on point and accurate I am about it, it tells me it really loves that. It tells me, hey, I can't get enough of that. And it tells me, if you want to do that all the time, that's okay with me. Okay? So let's pretend this is where you are now. Okay? Now, you go to your buddy's house, who's also a classical or flamenco guitarist, and you do what we all do, which is like, hey, you want to trade guitars for a bit? And you play on mine, I'll play on yours. It's fun. Unless you scratch my guitar, then I'm gonna kill you. But if that doesn't happen, then it's all fun and games. Okay. So your buddy picks up your guitar and strums a chord, and they go, man, who built this guitar? And you say, oh, Homeboy built it. And they say, man, Homeboy builds a nice guitar, doesn't he? You got a nice guitar. And you say, thanks. Yeah, Homeboy does build a really nice instrument. But that's not what's going on. That's not why that guitar sounds the way that it does. Now, you've been given a great tool. You've been given a tool with craftsmanship and artistry and an unbelievable amount of potential. You could not convince someone how much potential is in these instruments. It's just, people won't believe it unless they know it's there. But you're the one that listened to it. You're the one that was taught by it. Slowly over time, with little steps, learning techniques here and there, you learned to do what the guitar told you it was basically made to do, and things that it loves to do. And the more you feed it that stuff, the better it sounds. And then the more you can feed it the stuff, and then the better it sounds, until it becomes a different instrument altogether. Somebody else picks it up from a different point of view. Man, this guitar sounds great. And my response would be, thank you. Okay. So now you've gone from the person who is made to sound better by the instrument they're playing to the person who makes the instrument sound better than it would otherwise. And that is a fantastic place to be. It's also a great representation of you as an artist and exercising your artistry. Okay. So I can give you a couple of good examples. Well, I'll give you a couple of great examples of that off the top of my head. Okay. One is my teacher, Robert Guthrie. Okay. This guy had the best sounding guitars I've ever heard in my life. I could pick one of his guitars if he were still here and playing them, because they don't sound like that anymore. He passed away like 9 months. So none of his guitars sound like this anymore. BT dubs. But if he were still here and playing them, I could close my eyes and pick one of his guitars out of the lineup. You put it in my hands. Yeah, this sounds great. This sounds great. This is one of Guthrie's guitars. I would only need one chord. Because this is what he did. More than anyone else I've ever known in my life. Okay? And I kind of would ask him about it, and he was never super clear. But all I know was that he was never super clear about what he did specifically. But I don't really need to know too specifically. And I would say the same thing to you. If this sounds like something you're interested in, throw it out there as a goal. See if you can hear it when you listen to people play. Some people's guitars will have this fullness. You can literally hear the top moving. Like, not like a rattle, probably, but more like a SoundCloud type of effect. Because the player knows how to stimulate it and get it to move just right. Okay. Listen to Mr. Guthrie's recordings, and you will probably think, man, that's a great sounding guitar, and it is. But it would not sound as good in most anyone else's hands, right? Because that's what was going on. So he's the first example. The second example is the great flamenco guitarist Sabikis. So I've recently been really studying him a lot in my work. So he's kind of at the forefront of my mind anyway. But if you listen to his recordings or you listen to his videos, some of the video audio is not so good for stuff like this. But with some of them, and on the recording, see if you can catch a moment. Because when he plays, I mean, there's so much going on. A lot of it's very fast, very active, okay? It's like a cheetah just running, through the forest and jumping and doing all this stuff. But if you can catch a moment where he, hits an open fifth string, an open A string, and it rings for, 3-4 seconds, you will hear his guitar screaming with joy. Okay? And he's a flamenco player, so he probably had the lower action going on. That's supposed to not do a lot for extra resonance. Doesn't matter. He knew how to touch the instrument in just the right way to get it to scream. Not scream in pain, not scream out of torment, scream with joy. That's the best day of that guitar's life. Okay? And it wasn't because of the guitar. It was because of him. And then when you notice this stuff, compare him to another player. Who do you think has the better guitar? If you think Sabikis has the better guitar, now you know why. Because if Sabikis was playing on the other guy's guitar, it would sound like that after, I don't know, man, 10, 15 minutes. I'm serious. He could teach the new guitar. Sabikis would have been able to teach someone else's guitar what he knew it could thrive on within minutes. And I have a story like that. You don't even have to be Sabikis to experience something like that. So those are two great people to listen to for this type of stuff, right? My story about that is one time, well, I kind of have two stories. So they both involve my good friend Gabriel, right? So Gabriel has a guitar shop, and sometimes I go over there and do recordings for him. So the last time I went, I ended up recording on 4 different guitars, and I can't even remember all of what I played. I know one was a Kono, because I ended up taking it home with me. But the other guitars, I can't remember what they are. But I remember the first one I played, he was like, let's do this one first. So I pick up the guitar and I say, what is this? Tell me about it. And he says, such and such guitar maker, traditional bracing. I'm like, oh, cool. So, and he said, the only thing about it is that, the last guy that played it said it sounded kind of mousy. Mousy meaning like a little bit small. Not too big of a sound. And I was like, okay, whatever. Didn't think anything of it. So I start warming up. And in my warm-ups, they're not just physical warm-ups for me. They are movement. They're top movement warm-ups for the guitar. Because that's what Mr. Guthrie taught me. Okay? So I'm doing all that stuff on it. Right? And within a few minutes, and I start to kind of play some music, and I'm thinking, this guitar sounds really good. So I asked Gabriel, I said, who said this was mousy? Because I'm thinking I don't hear that at all. And he just goes, well, he said the last guy that played on it, but he said, but he didn't do all that stuff that you just did on it. So I thought, okay, it makes a big difference, doesn't it? When you tell the guitar, hey, you want to come do this stuff? And the guitar is actually, even if it's kind of asleep, it's actually chomping at the bit. It gets real excited, okay? The other story is, one time, I can't remember how, But Gabriel and me worked out a deal where I was going to take home a guitar that wasn't mine, but I was going to make a recording on it at home. It was a video that I did. It was an arrangement of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and somehow we decided to do that. So I took the guitar home to this studio here, and it was a guitar built by a man named Manuel Velasquez, and it was selling for I think 11 grand. It's a lot of money. Okay, really expensive. And this was my first experience playing a Velasquez guitar. So I get it home and I start to play. And when I start to play, I start thinking, man, 11 grand? Are you kidding me? For this instrument? I was like, my guitars are better than this. And they don't cost near that much. But I'm just thinking that. But I'm like doing my stuff. I'm going to make the recording like I told them I would. In 30 minutes, I was in love with that guitar. That guitar had been asleep. Like, whoever had it had put it in the case and, like, thrown it in the closet for a long time. So, and the sad thing about guitars is they are like, well, if you took it like your pet and put it in a case and threw it in the closet and shut the door, it would eventually starve to death. Okay, so do guitars. It just takes them a little bit longer, but conceptually it's the same. Okay, you have to play them to keep them alive, or they're going to starve. And then if you feed them, food, sounds, energy that really gives them life, then they're going to live very well. Okay. So this Manuel Velasquez, in 30 minutes, it turned into a completely different instrument. And it blew my mind. And then I was like, oh man, I would love to have this guitar. And then I kept it, made the recording, and I had to give it back. But I thought, at that point, I actually thought this guitar is actually worth every penny. It's worth what it's selling for. And it absolutely is. If you ever have a chance to buy a Manuel Velasquez and you can afford it, it is money well spent. Just treat it good. Treat it as good as you can. And it is definitely money well spent. So that's an instance where I learned it could not have been more than 30 minutes. And that thing was firing in a way that I didn't even know that was possible, right? So I always listen for this when I hear people play. I listen for this when I hear people talk about the guitar. People that are into this will talk about it because they are aware that it exists, and they also know how important it is. Why would you be in a functional relationship with anybody or anything that you loved and that it was such a huge part of who you are and not do everything in your power to strengthen that relationship and to keep it fulfilled and happy? So people that know about this will talk about it. People that don't know about it, they don't know that it exists. Okay? But if you're interested in it, I think it can be the umbrella under which you do all of your work. If everything is going towards getting the best result out of your instrument, you can't really go wrong. The worst that could happen is that one day you plateau and feel like you've gotten all you can. But my teacher played the guitar for about 70 years, give or take. Because I'm not exactly sure when he started. Somewhere around 70 years. And he said, right near the end of his life, quote, "I still learn something new about the guitar every week." And this dude ain't lying. He's not made that way. Okay. So that tells me you can pretty much get a lifetime's worth out of this if that's what you want. And if any point you want to peter out and say, I've done all I want to do, you can do that too, right? But, a teacher, our job is to give breadcrumbs sometimes, stepping stones, building things upon which other things can be built. Yes, yes. But we can't give a prescription, though. And people think that's how it works, but it don't work like that. You have to discover how to find your way, how to use the breadcrumbs, how to use the stepping stones to find your own way. And your teacher is a really valuable resource in that. But they cannot do all of that for you. And they shouldn't really try. They can help you as much as they can without doing everything for you. It don't work like that either. So I'm saying, if you're interested in this, throw it out there as a goal. I would think something like this. This sounds like one of the most interesting things I've ever heard about the guitar. I would like to know the guitar this way. I'm going to keep this in the back of my mind when I do all of my work and when I listen to guitar players play. Then that's all you need to do right now. Just treat it like it's important. And then you can be that guy that picks up the nice guitar, or girl, that picks up the nice guitar and sounds better than you ever have, but slowly over time learns a different way of going about it and becomes the person that makes the guitar sound better than it ever has. And I think that's one of the most artistic goals that you can accomplish.